What's up, everybody? It's Drew Wilkins with Swine and Bovine Barbecue. We've got the offset fired up, 300 degrees. We're going hot and fast on a brisket. Can we make one hot and fast as good as a low and slow brisket? We're gonna find out. Let's get going. So this is a little over a 10-pound brisket, and it's actually Wagyu. Picked this up from Costco Business Center. All of their primes were much larger than this, so decided to go the Wagyu route. So let's go ahead and trim this up. There's a couple of things we want to keep in mind, and that's one, where we're going to start right here with this decal fat. It is hard, going to provide no value on the brisket, but can provide some great value in burgers or sausage, or if you want to render it down into tallow, whatever you want to do. So we're just going to cut this out. Kind of follows a seam here. If we cut this in half, you can see nothing but fat. There's not a lot of fat left in here, so we're going to leave that. I don't typically worry too much about the bottom of the brisket, but there is a decent amount of fat on here, so we're going to trim some of this up. I always try and trim with the grain of the meat. You can see it's running this way, so I'm trying to cut that way. This is thin, that's going to come off, so I'm not going to worry about that. And that's about good enough for me. Sometimes I don't even touch the backside. Now, flip it over. The first thing we want to do is take care of this mohawk. It's this thin little piece of meat right here that the way we cook briskets is just going to burn up. So we'll cut this off. Also kind of a pocket of fat right here, so we're going to come down and get that off. And then now, one thing, I'm going to get rid of this plastic cutting board because even though I've got a towel underneath it, it is sliding all around on me. Maybe I need a bigger towel. I don't know what the deal is, but moving cutting board is dangerous. So we're going to get this out of the way. So now the name of the game is a 1/4 inch of fat across this. And since we're going hot and fast on this brisket, we definitely want to try and make sure not to scalp it. We want to leave at least a 1/4 inch of a fat. More is not going to be a problem with this. I'd rather have more than less. So for now, we're just going to trim this up till we get to a 1/4 inch of fat. So what we're doing here is I'll flip this over. So we're gonna round this off. This is super thin. That's gonna burn up. So we wanna make this side about as thick as this side. So now I've taken a little bit off already, so it was like this. So we're coming through, coming right about here. Make a cut that way. All this trim is going to burgers or sausage, primarily sausage. So don't worry, all this meat that I'm trimming off is not going to waste. All right, and just like that, our brisket is done. Got a nice little fat layer going around the lean. For the first time in a while, I didn't scalp it. Pretty proud of myself on that. I've been trimming a lot of briskets lately. One of the reasons that I went a couple of weeks without videos is because I was cooking a lot of briskets and ribs and sausage for some events. Had some practice recently. I guess it's paying off. Let's season her up. To start off with our seasoning, we're going on with a 50-50 mix of kosher salt and coarse black pepper, per usual. I find it's easier to get the sides when the meat side is up versus fat cap. I don't know why. Maybe it's different for you. Just for me, it's what I found. Follow that up. We're going to go on with a little bit of this Season It All. It's from Fiesta Spices. It's basically their version of a Lowry's. So we're going to go on with a light coating of that over the top. Flip it over. Do the same thing to the fat side. Brisket is nicely seasoned, so this is going to go in the fridge on a wire rack overnight. Let the seasoning adhere. If you've watched my videos before, you know that I do like to season big pieces of meat like this the day before. One, it helps the seasoning and salt penetrate the meat really throughout. And then two, especially with something like brisket, when you're typically waking up early, Saves you time in the morning. So this is going in the fridge. We'll see y'all tomorrow, fire up the pit, and talk more about this cooking process. It is the following morning. Our pit is at 250 degrees, so let's get our brisket on. Also going to put in our trusty blocking log. This will help heat not directly impact the front of our point here. And I know what you're thinking, hey, 250 degrees, that's not very hot and fast. And you're right. So we're going to talk about some of the things that we learned on our last hot and fast cook and what we're going to do differently this time. So let's shut it down, do some talking. Hot and fast brisket. This is our second time doing a hot and fast brisket on this channel. The first one, which I'll link here if you want to go check out, turned out okay, but the front of the point got nuked. Like almost not inedible nuked, right? It was definitely edible, but didn't slice very well at all, completely tore, shredded up, and just was not that great. Make it into chopped beef if you want, but that's not what we were going for with that brisket. Now, once you got in about an inch or two on that point, then it was fantastic. Had great rendering. The seam fat rendered really well. The fat on top of the brisket rendered really well, but we just really screwed up that point, and the flat was a little bit dry as well. So this time we're mixing it up a little bit. We're going to start off the first hour at 250 degrees. Then hour 2 and 3, we're going to bump it up to 275. So not really much different in the first 3 hours from a normal cook. But after that, we're going to go 300 to 325 for the duration of the cook. The first test we did, total brisket cook time was around 6 hours and 20 minutes. This one, I'm thinking it might add a couple of hours. We'll see. It's also a really small brisket. As mentioned, it was 10 pounds before we trimmed it. We put a decent trim on it, so it's not as big as the last one that we cooked. Hopefully we'll be in that 8-hour mark. We're gonna do an overnight rest, so we're not gonna be cooking and eating on the same day. You certainly don't have to do that, but really just trying to give this hot and fast brisket all the chance to be good. And an overnight rest can certainly help with that. Now we're just gonna dial in our temps and keep an eye on our brisket. We are 3 hours in. First hour, we tried to keep the pit around 250 degrees. The last two, we were about 275, and this is how our brisket's looking. So starting to get a really nice bark on it. I've also slowly been moving this blocking log closer to the point of the brisket as it shrunk a little bit. It is time to ramp up the temps. This is more so where the hot and fast comes. So we're gonna cook anywhere between 300 and 325 degrees for the remainder of this cook. So we'll keep you updated. For now, shutting it down, cranking up those temps. 1 hour after we ramped up the temps, and our brisket is looking pretty solid. But one thing that we're gonna do now that we didn't do in the last hot and fast brisket cook is we're going to foil temp the front of the point as well as the back of the lean. So what this just means is simply adding foil to the front, protecting it from some of that direct heat that it's getting. Even though we have the blocking log, we're still gonna do it. And then we're gonna go around here, just kind of get underneath it a little bit and wrap up the edges of this flat. That way it doesn't take the brunt of some of the heat that's coming off, since we are going hotter and faster. Shut it down, let it keep cooking. A little over 7 hours into our cook, and it is time to wrap this brisket. So we'll get rid of these foil tips. Those are no longer needed, and it's looking pretty fantastic. It's got a great bark. We did get a little bit of pooling, but not too much. But overall, very happy with how this brisket's looking. And right here on the front of the point, it's not overly hard or crunchy, which was an issue the last time we did a hot and fast. It's still soft, so we shouldn't, knock on wood, have any issues with it shredding like we did on the last one. So overall looking good. Let's wrap this. Normally a foil boat guy, but we're going with butcher paper today. So we've got 2 sheets laid out here. Didn't do a very good job of cutting them evenly. Then we're gonna spray them down. This is just some Worcestershire. That's what I used the last time I had spritzed some briskets, so that's what we're using today. We didn't really spritz at all today. And really spraying down this butcher paper will help a lot with just the pliability of it. So it's not necessary, but makes wrapping and maneuvering the butcher paper a lot easier. All right, got our brisket looking fantastic. So just gonna put it right here. Spritz the top of the brisket as well. Then Take our paper, overlap the brisket. I like to tuck each end underneath, so just lift up and tuck, lift up and tuck. We want this to be nice, tightly wrapped. Fold over, fold over, and we want to take this, pull it close to us. Again, make sure it's nice and tight. Fold it over, then just cut off too much paper, so that's why we're doing this step. Fold it over, that way we've got just one nice, tightly wrapped brisket. So we've got our brisket back on, and the flat is facing the firebox. This is really what we need to cook and get tender right now, so I want the brunt of the heat to hit this first. And just for reference, this was 175 when we wrapped it. So we've got probably anywhere between 25 to 35 degrees to go. 9 hours on the dot, and our brisket is tender and ready to pull. So I was hoping for 8 hours. We got 9. Not upset with that. Even a small brisket like this usually takes me at least 12 hours to cook. So very happy with the 9-hour cook time on this. We are nice and tender right here in the thick of the flat. We're probing about 211 degrees. I'm not sure how well that's going to show up on the camera, but we are nice and tender. So this is going to rest, come down to about 140, 145 degrees. My oven goes down to 145 degrees, so I'll put it in the oven, let it have a long heated rest overnight. Then we'll come back tomorrow, slice into it for lunch. Our brisket had a nice overnight rest, so let's unwrap it, see how it looks. We're not super soft right here, but it's not nearly the hardness that we got last time we cooked a brisket. So this is feeling pretty soft. All in all, looking pretty good. Let's slice into it, see how the inside looks. I'm just gonna slice it right in between the point and the flat, right in the middle. Not too bad looking. Nice rendered fat up top. The flat is looking pretty dry. We're also not getting a lot of juice out of the seam, so not looking great to start, but let's slice a little bit. This fatty side, yeah, we're dry. Definitely dry. Let's get a few more cuts. Let's go over to this side. That was the Mohawk side. A lot of places just turn that into chopped beef. This is looking a lot better. That is a pretty solid looking point slice. So this is a lot of times you see people cut up a little section at a barbecue joint, the burnt ends per se on a brisket. That looks really good. So let's give it a few more cuts. Did feel a little tightness right here, but that's not a bad looking slice whatsoever. Let's give it a few more, see how we're going. Right there, right here is where my knife was catching a little bit, so I'll have to be careful cutting. Looking good, but one thing I noticed right here is the top side where this point really thins out and gets into the flat, we're pretty shreddy. So the point itself looks fantastic pretty much throughout most of this cook, but right here where it's starting to become more flat, less point, it's overcooked. Different from the last time is because this is the area that was overcooked last time, but all in all, not looking too bad. So we've got this, get these slices out of the way. Let's see how the flat looks. Get a couple slices here. Yeah, we shredded right there. It's a little hard right there. Not looking too bad. Definitely got great fat rendering. Crumbly. Smells good. Let's do one more of these in-between slices over here. There'll be a little bit too much fat left on the trim just right there, but it's nicely rendered. It's kind of got that dark brown coloring, but all in all, looking pretty good so far. Definitely better than our last hotter and faster brisket. So now the most important part, how does it taste? Let's find out. It is time to eat our brisket. And just a quick recap, we started out, this was a smaller brisket, 10 pounds, trimmed it down, probably about 2.5 pounds we took off it. So really the starting cooking weight was probably closer to 7.5 pounds. We started out at 250 degrees for the first hour, bumped it to 275 for the last 2, and then finished anywhere between 3 and 325. Took 9 hours to cook, brought it down to about 145 degrees. That's what my oven goes to, so I put it in the oven at 145 degrees afterwards, sliced into it, and here we are. So first thing to do, we're gonna go for a little bite on this little burnt inside here. Messed up and cut the side next to the mohawk, which is basically just lean with a little fat over it, versus going for the burnt inside. So we're gonna give these little nuggets a taste first. They look fantastic. Let's see how they taste. Cheers. It's delicious. Really, really good. Towards the bottom though, where the lean side is, it's a little stringy. You know, that harder texture you get. We got a little bit on the side of the flat. I don't know how well you'll be able to see that on this, the lean side of this brisket. A little bit of that stringy texture. Otherwise, the flavor is fantastic. Absolutely loved it. This is a nice little slice of lean right here. Let's see how that tastes. Once you get more towards the outside of the brisket, you get more of that stringy type texture where it just was cooked too hot for too long of a period of time, and it's not that nice, soft, supple brisket texture that we love. See how this moist slice tastes. Fatty, moist, whatever you want to call it. Yeah, top to bottom, there was nothing wrong with that slice of brisket. Really, really good. Although I will say the one thing that I've noticed throughout every bite is it's not very smoky. Even though we tried to go a little lower at 250 than 275 to start things out versus cranking it at 300 to 325 the entire time, still not an overwhelmingly smoky flavor to this brisket. And again, it's not, I'm not looking for something that's bathed in dirty smoke, but doesn't have a ton of smoke flavor to it. So if you have people in your family or friends or whatever, they get a little indigestion if something's over smoked, this might be a good avenue for them, but not terribly smoky. I mean, it definitely tastes like barbecue and a smoked brisket, but it's not terribly smoky. And for our last bite, those of you that have watched me for a while know I love a fold over, and that is, for me, I like a slice of in between, right on the middle, some Martin's potato bread, and then some fresh yellow or white onions, whatever your preference is. I like a lot of them, because I love onions. Just put it on top, fold it over, take a bite. That is so good. The simpleness of white bread combined with that bite of some onions and a slice of in-between brisket, it's hard to beat. That's going to do it for the tasting of this brisket. All in all, really good brisket. You serve this to friends, family, everyone's probably going to like it. But is this version of hot and fast better than a traditional slower smoked or slower temperature cooked brisket? Answer is no. There's too little margin for error when basically being in a wind tunnel. I've got another brisket cooking on here for an event tomorrow, but you basically got a wind tunnel back there. And when you crank the temps up like that, it's just drawing and pulling. And I even played with the damper quite a bit, trying to keep some of that airflow down a little bit so it wouldn't ideally make these edges harder than they needed to be, but it just doesn't work that well. You can make a great brisket, and this is a great brisket, but it's not gonna be up to my standards or probably your standards as well if you're spending time trying to learn how to cook brisket better on a YouTube channel with the sides tight like this. Like, you want it to be nice, supple, slice well, not shred on you. Again, one of the reasons we trim our briskets as aggressively as we do is because we want an aerodynamic shape for the cooker, but we also want every slice to be servable. And in this case, you know, you're probably going to get a lot more shredding as you go through here, or it's going to be tougher. It's going to have that shreddable texture even if you do get a great slice when you chew it. So again, great brisket, but low and slow is still the way. This is hot and fast part 2. I don't know if we'll do a hot and fast part 3. I think that we've tried a couple of different ways here. And again, decent briskets. This one definitely better than round one, but if you're looking for consistency and having a higher margin of error, because we managed temps pretty well on this. Like, there wasn't much that I would change about trying to do a hot and fast brisket, at least top of mind as I'm thinking about it now, versus what we did. So I think we're going back to the original way of cooking them. There's no shortcuts to good barbecue, as they say. And while this is pretty solid, it's not going to beat a low and slow brisket. That's going to do it for today's video. If you liked it, please give it a thumbs up. If you want to see more videos like this, please hit that subscribe button. And if you've cooked a hot and fast brisket and had great success, or if there's anything you'd like to see me try different in a hot and fast brisket cook, please leave it down in the comments below. But as always, thanks for watching. We'll catch you in the next one. Bye.